بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وبارك على الأشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. Alhamdulillah, we have reached the next part of what we want to discuss in relation to this matter of al-talaq. And previously we discussed Kitab al-Dihar and the rulings pertaining to it. And today we will discuss another chapter, but it's also, again, as the previous chapter was mulhaq, so it's attached to the chapter of talaq where they share some similarities. And this chapter that we're going to discuss today, barakallahu fikum, is the chapter of al-Liʿān, Kitab al-Liʿān. And within this chapter, the author, raḥimahullah, discusses specific points in relation to that matter. Specific points in relation to that matter of Liʿān. And so the author, raḥimahullah, begins by mentioning إذا قذف الرجل امرأته البالغة عاقلة الحرة العفيفة المسلمة بالزنا لزمه الحد إن لم يلعن. And so the author begins by mentioning that if a man accuses his wife, Liʿān is essentially begins with the accusation of the husband towards the wife. So if the man accuses his wife that is baligha, so she's surpassed the age of puberty, aqila, she's of sound intellect, she's a hurra, she's free, afifa muslima, and so she's regarded as being a chaste Muslimah. If he accuses her of zina, then upon him is the had, and upon him is the had, the punishment of the one that accuses someone falsely of zina, as long as he does not engage in li'an. And so this word li'an, the word li'an is taken and is derived from the word la'n, la'n referring to the curse. And a la'n, meaning of la'n, is the person experiencing al-ib'ad and rahmatillah, that the person is distanced away from the rahmah of Allah wa yadu billah. He's distanced away from the mercy of Allah. And what occurs here is that if, for example, a man's wife is pregnant or she gives birth, and the man has doubt in relation to the child, in the paternity of that child, and he seeks to free himself from that pregnancy or the child, then what will occur is this matter of al-li'an. What occurs is matter of al-li'an, and we'll discuss how it occurs. And so, essentially, the individual, the man that accuses the wife, upon him is the punishment of the one that falls into the qadf, in accusing the chaste Muslim woman of zina. The qadf, the one that accuses the chaste Muslim woman of zina, and the had for that individual is that they are lashed 80 times. Now, as Allah Ta'ala mentions, فَاجْلَدُوا وَهُوَ 80 جلدة ولا تقبلوا لهم شهادة أبدا. ولا تقبلوا شهادة أبدا. And so Allah Ta'ala, as he mentions, and then you lash the person 80 times, and the witness statement from such an individual is never accepted. This is the punishment generally for the one that accuses yani the chaste Muslim woman of zina. However, this is a general ruling, and its ruling still applies for the husbands. If the husband accuses his wife of that. However, with this, then there's an exception, which is al-Liʿān. The exception, which is Liʿān. And al-Liʿān, the author raḥimahullah mentions wal-Liʿān أن يقول بحضرة الحاكم أو نائبه. يعني so al-Liʿān is that the person says in the presence of the hakim, in the presence of the ruler, or in the judge, or someone in his place, أشهد بالله عني أو عني لمن الصادقين فيما رميت به امرأتي هذه من الزنا ويشير إليها. نعم. And so the author, he mentions that the person in the statement of Liʿān, he says it first of all in the presence of a judge. So it's an actual reality, a court proceeding. So he says in the presence of a judge that I bear witness, that indeed I am from amongst the truthful in what I have accused my wife of from this matter of zina. Then he will point towards her. So they're both present in front of the judge, and he will point towards them. فإن لم تكن حاضرة سماها ونسبها. And if she is not present, then he names her. Then he names her. He names her, and not just her name, but her nasab as well, her lineage. And this is again for the purpose of establishing specifically that this individual, or specifying who the individual is. So they want to specify that this particular woman. نعم. Then ثم يوقف عند الخامسة فيقال له اتق الله فإن اتق الله فإن فإنها عفوا نعم فإنها عذاب الدنيا موجبة وعذاب الدنيا أهون من عذاب الآخرة. نعم اتق الله فإنها موجبة وعذاب الدنيا أهون من عذاب الآخرة. And so he says, he stopped on the fifth, and he says, fear Allah. He said to him, fear Allah, for indeed this speech that you have essentially brings about a specific necessity. The necessity is specific action. And indeed the adhab, the punishment of this dunya, is lesser and easier to handle than the punishment of the akhirah. So essentially, what is done here is that the man, he states this particular statement where he accuses the wife. And he does so 4 times. Before he proceeds with the 5th, he's stopped. Stopped by who? The hakim, by the judge. So before he proceeds, he's stopped by the judge. And it is said to him, fear Allah, for indeed what you're saying, it necessitates particular action. And indeed the punishment of this dunya is lighter than the punishment of the akhirah. What is the importance of the mention of the punishment of the dunya and the punishment of the akhirah? What is the comparison being made here in that statement? The lashing verses. Why the nar? So the person falls into a major sin. But so you're saying the fall into a major sin, so then the nar is for the individual? If it doesn't make tawbah, that's not why, no. Not necessarily because of that. The lashing sahih. So the lashing is the adab of the dunya. Naam, the adab of the akhirah is a result of what? Is the question clear? The adab of the akhirah. No, it's because he's telling the man to fear Allah. And he reminds him that adab of the dunya is lighter than the adab of the akhirah. He's addressing the man at this point. So essentially what he's referring to, the adab of the dunya is referring to the lashing. And the adab of the akhirah, of course, we know is the hellfire. And this is going to be as a direct result of the person receiving the laʿn of Allah. And his bu'd and rahmatillah, that he's distance away from the rahmah of Allah. So now, if the person accuses his wife of zina, then as soon as he made that accusation, then he has made it obligatory upon himself that he'll be lashed. Now, the dhimma is upon him. That he has to be lashed, except for what? If he engages in the statement of Liʿān, where he says, indeed, I'm being truthful, and may the curse of Allah be upon me if I'm lying. For him to. So now he's between one and the other. So if he's lying, or if he's not truthful, he's not able to bring the witnesses, then upon him is the lashing. But if he's lying and he still makes this statement, then what is upon him is worse, i.e. the laʿn of Allah. So essentially the judge mentions this to him to remind him, if you are lying, then take the lesser of the two punishments, which is the adab of the dunya. The lesser of the two punishments, which is the adab of the dunya, and the lashing. Because if you are lying and you continue with this upon that way, then you're going to take the worst of the punishment, which is the laʿn of Allah. I be in the receipt of the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does that make sense? So why is it done previous to that 4 times? Why does he mention this 4 times, the statement that indeed he's from the truthful? And if he's not from amongst the truthful, then he asks for the curse of Allah to be upon him. Why does he mention this 4 times? Indeed he's from the truthful, and if he's not from the truthful, then he asks for the curse of Allah to be upon him. Anyone know? Essentially, if a person accuses someone of zina, what does he require? 4 witnesses. And that's always required, except for in this scenario, if a man accuses his own wife of the zina, then he states this 4 times in place of those 4 witnesses. So he states and he affirms, this is what I know from the scenario. He affirms it 4 times in place of those 4 witnesses, and then he mentions it the 5th time. So then after those 4, before the 5th time, that's when he's reminded that if you continue with this, then indeed the curse of Allah will be upon you, and that is ashad. There is a greater harm upon you than that which is ahwan, the lesser of the 2, which will be the lashes. So as soon as he's made the accusation, now if he's lying, then the least that can occur to him is that he receives the lashes. But the worst that can occur is if he continues with the accusation, is that he receives that particular punishment. Now, and so if now he refuses, so if the judge mentions to him, or the naib, the one that is in place of the judge, mentions to him, then the adab is ahwan. The adhab, the punishment of the dunya is ahwan, is lesser and lighter. He's reminded of this. And if he refuses to, if he refuses in this regard to stop with the claim and desist, for then he mentions فَلْيَقُولْ وَإِنْ لَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ إِنْ كَانَ مِنَ الْكَاذِبِينَ فِيمَا رَمَيْتُ بِهِ امْرَأَتِي. And then he will say that indeed the curse will Allah be upon him, now if he's from amongst the liars. And in that which I have accused my wife with from this zinā. And so, with that being said, if this laʿn occurs, and he mentions this particular statement, then with that, the judge has established with that the separation between the two spouses. The judge establishes the separation between the two spouses. Naam. And so, with that being said, the woman after that, she will say herself with arba shahadat, she will bear witness 4 times herself, swearing by Allah Ta'ala, innahu limin al-kadhibin, that indeed he is from the liars. Naam, fima ramani bihi min al-zina, in that which he has accused me of from zina. So he's mentioned it 4 times. Then he mentions finally that the curse of Allah be upon me from lying. Then she must respond to that. So what do some of the fuqaha say if she doesn't respond? Well, no. So he says this 4 times, and he says the 5th time, and the curse of Allah be upon him. Which mentions that statement, if he's lying. And then, of course, now it's upon her to respond. What if she refuses to respond? What is the call in that regard? A particular opinion, and there's quwwah with it, to be fair. If she does not respond. I signs the acceptance of the claim now. And so thus? Let's put the mic on. The had now. So she faces the had. Of al-rajm. Because essentially, this claim or this accusation is the same as the accusation of any other individual that says that I saw this and these are my 4 witnesses. Now I witnessed the zina and these are the 4 witnesses. If that's established, then we know that for the bikr, for the one that is that hasn't been married previously, then they face the punishment of the lashing. Now for zina, that has to have the zina. As for the one that is a thayyib, the one that has been married previously or has been married, then the punishment for that individual is in that scenario is that they are stoned. So essentially this is the same scenario, but it differs just because it's the husband that is now making that accusation and is establishing these facts. So now he's established it, and even though now he hasn't brought 4 witnesses, he has put himself in the place of those 4 witnesses by way of him saying, I witnessed this myself, and it's my home. And he's referring to himself as the husband, and so he's referring to himself as the 4 witnesses. And so due to that, we said that now the dhimma is upon her. Now, so now she's accused of that now, and upon her in that regard is to either free herself from it or accept that what occurs from after that. And so in freeing herself from it, She must bear witness again 4 times. So 4 times, essentially the 4 times that she bears witness is to cancel out the 4 times that he has mentioned his witness statement. And establish it 4 times that indeed he is amongst the kadhibin. He is amongst the liars, and that which he is accused from zina. And then she'll be stopped before the 5th time. So the man will stop before the 4th time. Naam. And what was said to the man before the man was stopped before the 5th time as well. And what was said to him? Fear Allah, ittaqillah, and what else? That's the one thing that was mentioned. What else was mentioned to him? The adab of dunya is ahwan. The adab of dunya is less, it's lighter than the adab of the akhirah. You're reminded of this. The same thing occurs with the woman. So when she's rejecting his statement, then the same thing occurs. She's advised to fear Allah, and then she's reminded that the adab of the dunya is lesser than the adab of the akhirah. Naam. And if she refuses to desist in what she's in her counterclaim or her rejection of the husband's claim, then she will conclude in what she says. And she mentions أن غضب الله عليها إن كان من الصادقين فيما رماني به زوجي هذا من الزنا. And then she asks that on the 5th occasion may the ghadab, also in other narrations the laʿn, may the ghadab and the laʿn of Allah be upon her if indeed her husband is from the truthful. The ghadab and the laʿn of Allah be upon her if indeed she is from the truthful. What is the difference between what the husband says and what the wife says? For those that are awake. What does the husband say and what does the wife say? And on the 5th occasion, what's the difference? No. No. Husband asks for the curse and the husband asks for the anger. Why is there this difference? What's the significance of the anger? Ashad? No. Why? So why does she ask something which is ashad? No, it's more severe. Why though does she ask something more severe than him? He's the one that's accused. He's the accuser. So then why is he asking for something which is less in severity? Question clear? No, not necessarily that. It's a good answer though, but it's not correct. Essentially, because when it comes to what she's saying, if she's lying upon absolute knowledge. Now, she's lying, her actions are based upon absolute knowledge. The husband may accuse the wife of something, and he may believe that he saw something, and he's convinced that he saw something. However, it may not have occurred for whatever reason. It may not have occurred. The wife knows exactly if it has occurred or not. So it's based upon absolute knowledge. And when we recite Surah Al-Fatiha, we mention اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم. And who are the مغضوب عليهم? The Jews. Now, well, what is the significant khisla about them? That specific characteristic. They knew, they had knowledge, but they didn't act upon it. Naam. So essentially, this is something which is consistent. The one that has knowledge but does not act upon that knowledge, or transgress, the person falls into transgression, even with the knowledge, then this is an action that earns the anger of Allah Ta'ala. And so this is why the woman, she will ask for that particular matter of the anger. Now, the anger to be upon her. And not just the laʿn, but the anger to be upon her as well. This is why it's more severe. And so thereafter, the author, he mentions ثم يقول الحاكم قد فرقت بينكما فتحرم عليه تحريما مؤبدا. And so then the Hakim mentions that indeed I have separated the two of you. And the woman now becomes haram for that man mu'abbadan. It's tahrim which is permanent. Naam, it's a tahrim which is permanent. Naam, that it's not possible for them to reconcile. It's not possible for them to reconcile. What if now, for example, she marries again, and she marries and she consummates the marriage, and that marriage comes to an end? Can she now go back to that husband? Question make sense? No. She can't go back. So this is what we're referring to here is the absolute separation in this regard. So it's not the same as talaq. Talaq, as we know, if the person, the man divorces the talaq and the talaq is ba'in. So he divorces the wife 3 times. Whether it's 3 times in one go upon bid'ah or 3 times, in 3 separate times upon the sunnah. If the person does this 3 times, then we know that this is referred to as talaq, which is ba'in. Now, the irrevocable divorce. The irrevocable divorce, meaning though, is irrevocable until she marries a zawjan ghayrahu. That she marries a husband other than him and consummates that marriage. Then, if she does not, is not successful in that marriage, and then she is permitted to go back to that husband. Is that clear, barakallahu fikum? However, in this scenario here of Liʿān, if they go through this whole process, then they are separated for eternity, or they're separated permanently. And with that, we see, alhamdulillah, of course, the hikmah in that, because they've gone through this process where within that process, the husband's accused this woman of zinā, and she's accused him of lying. So now they have essentially, both of them, attacked the honor of one another with some of the greatest of statements. And so with that being said, there can't really be any really real means for reconciliation, because they've taken it to that extent now. Now, to the extent where they've invoked the curse of Allah upon their own selves in light of another person's action, or they invoke the anger of Allah upon their own selves in light of another person's action. So as soon as the person engages in this the matter of Liʿān, then this is something which is absolute. This is a matter which is absolute, and Allah Ta'ala knows best. طيب. وإن كان بينهما ولد فنفاه انتفاها عنه سواء كان حملا أو مولودا ما لم يكن أقر به ووجد منه ما يدل على إقراره. So, with that being said, now on top of that, we have the situation of the walad, the child. So if you have a child now, between them is a child, and he makes negation of the lineage of that child, or the ascribing the child to him. So he negates the paternity of that child. the man, he negates that he's the father of the child, then that negation is affirmed. So this is by extension of the li'an. So by the person the person accuses the wife, and then with that he goes on to mention as well. He goes on to mention that this is not. He states that it's not his child. So further to that, then that is a particular hukum which is mulhaq. So it follows on and essentially is attached to the ruling of the li'an. It's attached to the ruling of li'an. So now the woman is freed from him, and that child is not ascribed to him either. Now the child is not ascribed to him either. And so if the man enters the child into that li'an as well. So this is irrespective, and Ibn Qudāmah, he mentions, this is irrespective of whether the child is is within the still being carried, so within the pregnancy, or that child has already been born. And so then this negation is upheld. This negation is upheld. Except for, now as you mentioned, if with that there's something that indicates, or with that, if the man ascribes the child to himself, so he affirms that is his child, first and foremost. If he affirms it himself, then the li'an is restricted to the separation between him and the wife. If, however, he barakallahu fikum, he doesn't restrict it to himself, or he is mentioned, or is other proofs to show that that child is in fact his child, then this particular li'an doesn't occur. Now, particular li'an doesn't occur in relation to the child. Does that make sense, barakallahu? So there's a difference between the two. So, and so in that case, the child is ascribed to the mother. The child is ascribed to the mother. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. And now, and this is the main points we want to mention here in terms of the chapter. We'll go on to mention some extensions to this chapter in our next lesson, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum. Wa jazakumullahu khairan. Wa sallallahu wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Barakallahu feekum. No.
Once they're separated, then it varies for the man or the woman again.
So once they're separated, so there's still the ዒddah for the woman. So she still has to experience the ዒddah. Why? Because what we discussed previously, the ዒddah, we mentioned some of the hikam, some of the wisdoms found within the asbab, the reasons. Do you remember what they were? Some of them were? Times pregnancy, no. And by extension, it's the lineage. Now, these are some of the reasons. It's not just to make sure to affirm and to ascertain that the marriage has fully come to an end, that they both agree to end the marriage, or the husband has agreed to fulfill the talaq, but also to establish whether there's a pregnancy or not, and whatever else. If now they engage in this particular court proceeding of li'an, then with that being said, the ዒddah is still needed to be fulfilled. And then if now, for example, it's discovered that she's pregnant, then what? And that was your question, but I've got one now. If it's discovered that she's pregnant, then what? Question makes sense? Can I repeat it? No. So they've engaged in li'an. They've gone to the judge and they've separated them because of this li'an. So now she's entered into her iddah. Within that iddah, she discovers she's pregnant. What is the next course of action? Find out the lineage of the child. What do you mean? Ask the father. Ask him what, sorry? No. So what's established next is that it has to be established now with that father. Does he extend this li'an with that child as well? Is it understood that this li'an, this particular li'an, is with the child as well? Does he free himself just from the mother or from the child as well? Now, as mentioned, if he frees himself from the child, then this is fulfilled. If now he doesn't free himself from the child and he affirms the child was his, then it's still regarded as being the child under his lineage. Still regarded as being the child under his lineage. No. I thought.
So you mentioned that the father can describe the child as being his, or if there's some proof.
Yes.
What would an example of proof be?
No. What example of proofs be? What example of proofs be? So it said there's proofs. What example of proofs be? That the child is actually ascribed to the father. No, it crossed my mind. I don't believe so. I don't know. I don't think they could say that's a proof. It supersedes the ahkam that I mentioned. No, we're saying that so it's ascribed to the father if he ascertains it himself, asserts it himself, or there's a proof. So then, what would be example of the proof be? Not necessarily. But what an example of proof could be is now if it's established, for example, that the zani, the one that committed the zina, he's barren, for example. Now, so he's not able to produce children, or that is established, for example, that this zina, for example, the zina occurred after the child was born. So, for example, the child is born, and so it's established that this action occurred after the child was born. So, of course, it couldn't have occurred, before that. So then it can't be ascribed to anyone other than the child, than the father. Barakallahu feekum. No.
So what's the response to people who say Islam the violent religion based on like the stoning?
Everything is in its correct place. So even if we say based on the stoning, or even based upon, they say that Islam is violent not only based upon the stoning, but let's say it based upon the execution of the murtad as well, the one that leaves the fold of Islam. We say that essentially Islam has come to protect specific matters within our lives. From that is the lineage. From the evils of zina is that it distorts the lineage of the awlad. It distorts the lineage and who a person can be ascribed to. And whilst we live in a society that does not give us any importance, we're finding now that people are starting to find greater importance with it. And people, they hold this in high regard because the lineage is important. It's important to know where you have come from and what is your asl, and that the person isn't now just is unknown where he's come from and who he's related to. So, and just to put into context, if we were to say to an example, for example, if we were to say to an individual, we're going to take you away from your family and you're never going to know who they are, no one would accept that, because we would accept that, we'd understand that that particular action is oppressive. In cutting someone off from their lineage or not establishing a person's lineage is the same action, taking them away from those that are related to them. And so zina is a means of perpetuating this particular issue of cutting off people from their lineage and their families and establishing relationships without families. And it comes with greater harms. And it comes with greater harms in terms of communities. So now, with that being said, if we know that this particular action, zina, causes that, then there has to be a specific deterrent for it. And so, even though the person may claim it's violent, their claim is violent because they want to engage in it. The whole point is that you don't engage in it, and so the violence doesn't occur. The whole point is that you don't engage in it, and so if now everyone abides by that and is well aware of the of this particular deterrent, then they don't engage in it. Just like now, a person saying that it's violent that the one that kills is executed as well. The whole point is that they don't kill. The point isn't that they kill and then they have to face execution. The point is that they understand of this great deterrent, and so due to that great deterrent, they don't engage in killing. Hence why Allah Ta'ala mentions qisāsi hayā. And within this qisās, these legislative punishments, is hayā, is life in of itself. And so, with that being said, it's not a case of now that we understand that this is something that we encourage a person to do. Rather we encourage the opposite, so they don't face that particular punishment. Another point to mention as well is that these things occurred in an environment that is controlled, i.e. تحت راية الحاكم. So it's done under the say-so of the wali al-amr, of the ruler. And it's not merely an action that is done just because the person believes someone's fallen to zina, or seen someone commit zina, for example. No, rather it's a controlled matter and is taken back to the ruler or the one that is in place of the ruler. And so it's not a matter which allows for fawda, chaos. And when people make these statements about it's violent, then what they are really trying to allude to is that this is a matter of violence where people engage in violent acts in a chaotic manner, however they wish. No, there's a whole due process. If that process is fulfilled and the person was aware of this deterrent and still fulfilled it, then upon them is the had, upon them is the punishment. Wallahu musta'an. Now, barakallahu feek. خير. حياكم الله اخوان، بارك الله فيكم. صلى الله وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.